Hi, and welcome to English-Fabule. Are you learning English? Great. Let's learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's get started.
In the year 2025, the United States faced a serious problem. The federal government had to stop many of its normal operations. This event is known as a government shutdown. It was not a short problem. It became the longest government shutdown in American history. It lasted for 41 days, which was longer than the previous record set during President Donald Trump's first time in office, between 2018 and 2019. This meant many government offices closed their doors, and many workers could not do their jobs. For more than 6 weeks, the country felt a deep crisis. People began to worry about the future. Essential government services, from national parks to permits, were affected. This long shutdown showed big problems in how the government works. It also showed who has power in politics and what happens when lawmakers cannot agree. Millions of Americans rely on federal services every day, and the shutdown put many of them in a very difficult situation. The normal flow of life in America began to change, causing great concern. The shutdown began on October 1, 2025. Congress, the group of people who make laws and decide on spending, could not agree on a new budget. A budget is a plan for how the government will spend money for the next year. They needed to pass this plan for the financial year 2026. Because they did not agree, the government could not get the money it needed to operate fully. Without an approved budget, parts of the government had to close down. This disagreement stopped many parts of the government from working. It caused problems for federal workers, for important programs, and for the country's economy. This story will look at why this long shutdown happened. We will explore the main reasons for the big fight and the political battles that kept it going. We will also see the damage and problems it caused for ordinary people and for the nation. Finally, we will learn about the difficult journey to find a way out of this crisis and get the government working normally again. 2. The big problem. The long government shutdown did not start because of a simple money problem. The real fight was about health care for many Americans. It was about special money for health insurance called the Affordable Care Act, or ACA subsidies. These subsidies are also known as Obamacare tax credits. They help millions of people afford health insurance that they buy through a special marketplace. Without this financial help, about 8 million Americans would face much higher costs for their health insurance. For these people, getting health care would become very difficult or even impossible. Democrats in Congress believed it was very important to continue these subsidies. They argued that many citizens rely on this money to stay healthy and secure. They wanted to extend these credits past their end date of December 31, 2025. This would help more people get insurance in the future. However, extending these credits would cost the government a lot of money, about $350 billion over 10 years. Because of this, Democrats insisted that any bill to fund the government must include money to continue these health care subsidies. They said that taking away this help would cause great harm to millions of families. Republicans saw the issue differently. They wanted to discuss health care policy on its own, not as part of the yearly budget bill. They proposed what they called a clean, continuing resolution. This meant they wanted a bill that would simply fund the government for a short time, without adding any new policies like health care subsidies. Republicans felt that mixing these two very different topics made it harder to agree. President Donald Trump played a key role in this standoff. He believed the shutdown could be an opportunity to make the government smaller. He was not willing to quickly agree to the Democrats' demands. Even though Republicans controlled the House and the Senate, they still needed votes from Democrats to pass a full budget bill. This strong disagreement between the two parties, especially over the ACA subsidies, caused everything to stop. Both sides refused to change their minds, and this big problem kept the government closed for many weeks. 3. How people suffered. The government shutdown made life hard for many people across the country. Around 900,000 federal workers were told to stay home without pay. Another 2 million federal employees still went to work, but they did not get paid. This caused a lot of stress for families. Military personnel also faced a difficult time, unsure if they would get their paychecks. The Trump administration tried to help active duty military pay with defense money. But the risk of all military branches missing pay caused much worry. Food for many families was also in danger. The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, called SNAP, helps about 42 million Americans buy food. For the first time, this program stopped getting money. The Department of Agriculture said no SNAP benefits would be given out in November. Many states sued the government to restart payments. A judge said benefits must be paid, but a higher court stopped that order temporarily. President Donald Trump's administration appealed this decision. So, some states could give food money, but others could only give a little or none. Travel by air became very difficult. Air traffic controllers had fewer staff and worked many extra hours without more pay. The Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA, told airlines to cancel flights. First, 4% of flights were cut, then 10%. By November 9, more than 2,500 flights were canceled. Over 10,000 flights were delayed. People planning to travel for Thanksgiving worried a lot. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy warned that travel would get worse. The FAA even stopped private planes from using some big airports. The country's economy also suffered. Experts said the shutdown made the economy smaller. About $55 billion were lost. Every week the shutdown continued, another $7 billion were lost. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent warned that the economy could slow down by half. Also, the government stopped collecting important economic information. This made it hard for business leaders and financial experts to understand what was happening. The shutdown truly affected everyone, from workers to families needing food to people trying to travel. 4. The government stops. In Washington, D.C., the political situation was very difficult. Republicans held control of the government. President Donald Trump was the leader. Republicans also had a majority in both the House of Representatives and the Senate. However, passing a budget bill in the Senate required 60 votes. The Republicans did not have this many votes on their own. This meant the Democrats had an important power. They could stop any budget plan that Republicans wanted if they all voted together. And this is exactly what happened. Senate Democrats, led by their minority leader Chuck Schumer, worked together. They rejected the budget plans that the Republicans proposed. For example, a budget bill that passed in the House of Representatives could not pass in the Senate. It failed with only 44 votes in favor and 48 against. The Democrats also had their own plan, which wanted to increase health care spending. This plan also failed, showing how deep the disagreements were. Many different solutions were tried in the Senate. Senators held continuous votes from early October through mid-November, but every proposed budget solution failed. The deadlock meant that the government stayed closed for many weeks. A few senators sometimes voted against their party. For instance, Senator John Fetterman, a Democrat from Pennsylvania, voted for some Republican ideas. Also, Senator Rand Paul, a Republican from Kentucky, did not support his party's funding bills. He voted based on his own beliefs. But these individual votes were not enough to break the main problem. The large disagreements between the two parties continued. Both Republicans and Democrats blamed each other for the shutdown. Republicans said that Democrats were holding the government hostage. They wanted to force health care policy into the budget talks. Democrats, on the other hand, argued that Republicans were making ordinary Americans suffer. They believed Republicans refused to protect important health care subsidies. President Trump also took a strong stance. He refused to negotiate at first. He even posted an AI-generated video that made fun of Democratic leaders. The video said Democrats were stopping the government from working. His administration also tried to make big changes to the federal workforce. On October 10, notices were sent to about 4,000 federal employees, telling them they might lose their jobs permanently. A federal judge later stopped these layoffs. This showed that the shutdown was not just about money, but also about bigger political goals. The fighting and blaming made the crisis very long and hard to solve. 5. A new agreement. After many weeks, the government shutdown continued, causing more problems for people across the country each day. By the second week of November, a group of senators decided they needed to find a solution. These senators were known for working across political lines and finding middle ground, rather than holding firm to strict party positions. Key figures in this group included Democratic Senators Jeanne Shaheen and Maggie Hassan, along with Independent Senator Angus King. They started serious talks with Republican leaders, such as Senator Susan Collins and Senate Majority Leader John Thune. They started serious talks with Republican leaders, such as Senator Susan Collins and Senate Majority Leader John Thune. Through these talks, it became clear that Republicans would not agree to include money for health care subsidies directly in the budget bill needed to reopen the government. After many long and intense discussions, a breakthrough agreement was reached on November 9. This deal was designed to reopen the government immediately. It promised to provide money for government operations until January 31, 2026, offering 3 months of important stability for the nation. The agreement also included full-year funding for several vital government areas. This meant departments like agriculture, which helps farmers and provides food safety, and Veterans Affairs, which serves those who fought for the country, would be fully funded. Crucially, the SNAP Food Assistance Program, which helps millions, would receive funding until September 30, 2026. Another key part of the compromise addressed the situation of federal workers. Those who had been sent home without pay would get their jobs back. They would also receive all the pay they had missed during the shutdown. Furthermore, the agreement stated that no more federal workers could be laid off before January, offering temporary job security. However, this agreement did not immediately extend the Affordable Care Act (ACA) subsidies, which was a main demand from Democrats. Instead, the deal included a promise that the Senate would hold a vote on extending these health care credits by the middle of December. For Democrats, this was a significant compromise, as they had pushed hard for immediate health care funding. When the procedural vote took place in the Senate, the result was 60-40 in favor of advancing the deal. 8 Democratic senators and the independent Senator King crossed party lines to support it. Most Republican senators also backed the plan, showing broad support for ending the crisis. Only one Republican senator, Rand Paul, voted against it. This crucial vote was a major step towards ending the longest government shutdown in American history, bringing hope for relief to a troubled nation. 6. Who was the winner? The deal reached to end the long government shutdown was a compromise. After many difficult weeks, both political parties finally agreed on a path forward. However, each side had to give up something, and each could claim some victories. Republicans achieved a main goal. President Donald Trump's administration wanted to keep the debate about health care spending separate from the general budget. The new agreement did exactly that. It did not include an extension of money for the Affordable Care Act, also known as ACA subsidies. Instead, Democrats received only a promise that the Senate would hold a vote on these health care credits in December. There was no guarantee the vote would pass or that the subsidies would be extended. By separating the health care issue, Republicans ensured they could discuss it later without the pressure of a government shutdown. This gave them a stronger position for future talks about health care policy. Democrats also secured important wins for many Americans. They successfully blocked Republican plans that included spending cuts they strongly opposed. A very significant victory for Democrats was protecting the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. This program provides food assistance to millions of people. The agreement guaranteed that SNAP would be funded until September 30, 2026. This brought great relief to many families depending on these benefits. Additionally, the deal ensured that federal employees who missed paychecks during the shutdown would receive their back pay. Those federal workers who had been temporarily laid off would be rehired, protecting their jobs and income. The compromise showed the strengths and weaknesses of both parties. Republicans, with President Trump's support, showed they were willing to accept a long shutdown to get their way on separating health care. This strategy worked to their advantage. Democrats showed strong unity for many weeks, fighting to protect important programs and workers. However, in the end, they could not force health care subsidies into the budget deal. Some Democrats were disappointed. They felt the deal did not do enough to help people afford health insurance. This revealed some differences of opinion within the Democratic Party. The agreement was a complex mix of wins and losses. It reopened the government, but it also highlighted the deep political challenges that still remained. 7. What happens next? The Senate's recent vote was a big step, but it was not the final act to end the government shutdown. The Senate still needed to hold more votes to officially pass the compromise bill. This bill was the agreement to open the government again. Many senators from both parties had shown support, so it was likely to pass. Once the Senate approved it, the bill would move to the House of Representatives. The House also needed to vote and agree to the deal. House Speaker Mike Johnson announced that House members would return to Washington very soon. He expected them to vote on the agreement later that same week. Speaker Johnson needed enough votes from his party and perhaps some Democrats to pass the bill. President Donald Trump's team had been part of the talks. It looked like President Trump would sign the deal if it reached his desk. His support was key for getting the necessary votes in the House. The very last step was for President Donald Trump to sign the legislation. Only then would the agreement officially become a law. When the president signed it, the government would finally reopen after 41 days. All the federal agencies would begin to call their workers back to their jobs. Important government programs would start running again, and vital public services would be restored across the country. However, even after the president signed the bill, things would not become normal right away. It would take significant time for the country to fully recover from the longest shutdown in American history. Air traffic control systems, for example, would need weeks to work fully again after facing staff shortages and many delays. Many canceled flights meant a slow return to normal travel. Also, it would take several weeks for food help money, known as SNAP benefits, to reach all the millions of people who needed it. The full restoration of all critical government services could extend well into late November or even beyond. The crisis would be over, but its effects would still be felt for many weeks across the nation. 8. The end of the crisis. The longest government shutdown in American history was finally over. The country could breathe again. Federal workers would get their pay. Food aid programs for millions of families would restart. Air travel would slowly return to normal. This was good news for many people across the United States. The deal reached in Washington stopped the immediate problems. However, the end of the shutdown did not mean the end of all problems. This deal was only for a short time. It gave the government money to run until late January of the next year. This meant that in just a few weeks, Congress would need to agree on a new budget again. The big political disagreements were still there, waiting. One main problem was health care. The shutdown began because politicians argued about money for health insurance. The New Deal did not solve this. It only promised that lawmakers would talk about it later, in December. There was no guarantee that they would find a solution then. Millions of Americans still faced higher costs for health insurance if no agreement was made. This long shutdown was a warning. It showed how easily the government could stop working. It showed how political fights could hurt ordinary people. Many federal employees lost pay for weeks. Families worried about food. Businesses lost money. The cost of the shutdown was very high, not just in dollars, but in human suffering. The crisis ended, but the big questions remained. Why is it so hard for leaders to agree? How can the government work better for everyone? Will there be another shutdown soon? The long weeks without a full government reminded everyone that important decisions have real effects on people's lives. It showed that democracy needs leaders to work together, even when they disagree. It highlighted the fragile nature of government when deep divisions exist. The country avoided a deeper crisis this time, but the path ahead still looked difficult. What do you think is the most important lesson from this long government shutdown?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.